reading from the Philokalia as I take a little afternoon walk, having rearranged the resume, sending out the resume, can I get an interview, this, that, and the other, this, that, and the third. So I was watching Conservatives, the opening of Conservatives thing on the Black Conscious Conservatives, and got to the point where he started going into like the website of the person who founded it, and I understand what he was getting at. After seeing rap music go from something like X-Clan, Gangstar, one of my favorite and first tapes that I ever bought myself was that I probably listened to endless numbers of times, was by All Means Necessary, Boogie Down Productions, with this song, the famous anthem of rap music, My Philosophy. And how really, after a certain point, KRS-One became an afterthought by like the late 90s. And especially after he had made a Sprite commercial, it was sort of like, he's got to get that money and this, that, and the other, and this, that, and the third. And I look back on it and I was like, no, I could understand, the guy, he had been in the game since like 1985. This was well on a decade now. And before then, he was doing parties. The Boogie Down Productions was a crew of, because the way that hip hop really started, just as the gangs of Chicago started in many ways, like there was always gang culture and there was the immigrant gangs of Chicago, but that what we think of now, to this day, many of them are named after actually boys clubs, like clubs for young men that were around, certain neighborhood like youth clubs, and that those youth clubs slowly became more and more, gangs, and so somebody like Wrong to Strong has really documented how they went from something with really beautiful Letterman sweaters and holding dances, and that these dances became parties, and eventually those, like in a lot of scenes, that those parties had also their not so legal activities. Boys and men were competitive with each other, so fights would happen between different groups in different neighborhoods, and because that is the nature of humans. I really, reading the Philokalia, it takes me to this point where it's like that we are what we are as people, and a lot of ideologies and kind of social movements and social theories are always desperate to try to say, now we are this, or I am a this, and because of this movement or this social theory, this is going to change the world, or because we have some type of set of rules around some social theory or kind of a ideological group, and but it always has to start, like the Philokalia and a lot of Orthodox teaching has, because there's a monastic tradition that's so strong, there's this sort of control group for the mind, and so they're able to sit back and say, well, this is what people do though. Don't think that just because you have some new set of ideas or some kind of political credo that's going to change humans. In fact, you wouldn't have a political credo unless you knew that there was something about people you wanted to change, that you want them to believe in something, you want them to achieve magnanimity, to be magnanimous, to reach the magna point, the highest, to try to achieve the highest point they can. It's just coming up with some theoretical or sociological or philosophical model to do so. This is actually why Christianity has been so successful as a religion, because it keeps going back to humans are like this. Even though it's obvious that we were made to be something even that the angels bowed to, that the messengers of God, the direct messengers that keep the universe in motion and do his will, bowed to this creation that is human, and that humans were then, because of our magnanimity, were given the duty of caring for his creation, but our minds, the nous, becomes darkened by our fallen nature, but we're not so fallen that we cannot return and achieve theosis, and that's the whole point. Is, if there was no, even Buddhism gets into this idea of, if there is no ability to improve the human, why would you even teach humans anything? Why would there even be education? He's like, that they're like, obviously humans can improve themselves, and it's something about the nature of humans to do that, and that making us so different than other creatures, that they can learn things. It seems that that's fundamental. So then hence their argument of the mind, but it's that humans are quite unique in that we will try to pass on for hundreds to thousands of generations lessons to each other on how to improve. And so one of the things that has disturbed me so much about recent Black American politics, and that this seems to be almost completely universal outside of some of the most sort of quiet yet conservative voices, is this idea of the oppression, doing something in spite of our oppression, rather than achieving something in the great tradition of victory, that you overcome the harsh reality of the world. And that's, I find that a lot of these men who, especially in social media, who are like Black veterans, that they're quiet in many ways. They aren't sort of outrageously verbose, and they even are that their criticisms of sort of the worst of Black Americana, they're approaching it from, well, at one point I could not pass some absolute test that I had to pass to achieve the level that I did to be a warrior, but I passed that test, and I am among the men who is a warrior, and other warriors respect that, and other men respect that. And that especially how the veteran community, how the armed forces have been so very diverse over my entire lifetime, since the post-Vietnam era. And I mean, Vietnam was really when you saw a very, very, like, the largest number of Black Americans conscripted. And that was also one of the hard parts. Like, if you watched things like Tour of Duty, that the Viet Cong and such would try to set soldiers against each other with these, like, really funny things, that they would have, like, almost like a Tokyo Rose kind of character who would say this and say that and be like, revolution, soul brothers. And it was just a funny, and it was the reason why I especially found it so funny is because of the tradition that comes out of teaching of rolling of the tongue in that region of the world when English was taught. That was very different than other that like I met a lady who was from the era of China she was from, and the types of schools she was from. I think it was a Dutch school. They had to sit there and roll their tongue for like minutes at a time because of the different that different sound of the LR sound, and that's native to the dialect of Chinese she was speaking. And so she had to get used to rolling her tongue. So she would pronounce things, and it was just so fascinating to hear her speak, because it was this accented English, but then she would roll her tongue, and it was a very, very interesting. She was a very interesting woman. Taught me a lot about how to make sandwiches properly. So in watching this thing by Conservative on the Black conscious community, it was because there's also the quote-unquote conscious community with like kind of 2 Ks, and you see that out of Saw Netter TV on YouTube, and I think there's also like Conscious News. And these are very pro-black, and even to some degree kind of black nationalist. Hotep Jesus actually brought something up that kind of dovetails with this, of this idea. He said one of the legends of sort of the Hoteps is that Marcus Garvey claimed to be the first fascist. Now, at the time, at his time in history, this would not have been a bad thing. Most of the world was embracing, like, kind of, they were trying to figure out a new theory on how to have states with a capital S, where America was quite unique in our construction, like to have the European states that were now being formed after, by the League of Nations, and maybe a little prior to that, kind of coming up with borders. What kind of constitutions do you come up with? What are rights? Because our concept of rights and the British concept of rights and the French concept of rights, the Italian version, these would have all been very different ideas. It would have only made sense. Dang, I wonder if I could, trying to see if I could get an image of, there we go. Can you see? There we go. I hope you guys could see that bird overhead. But I forget what somebody told me. I think was it a kestrel, or I think it was somebody was saying it wasn't a kestrel, but I think they said it was a kestrel. I don't know. Anyway, so now this idea that's been popping up with sort of the return of revolutionary ethnic politics, and then people who are of conservative leaning. One of the things about it is not the actual traditions of the culture and the achievements of the past. Is that not enough? Do we need some new ideology? Something new, a new definitive term? Like somebody like James Brown really has a lot of these kind of famous songs and stuff, and that this idea of like some kind of new terminology for a new era, or that you have to come up with like a branding for a movement, that he seems to be somebody who didn't really quite embrace that as much as it might have he might have been at once pictured to have, and that now we're sort of it's sort of being forced that there has to be some almost branded revolution. You have to be able to market this. Oh my gosh, it's so adorable. This mom is like dancing around. I'm not going to show you. It's just adorable. I don't know what I think she's trying to embarrass her son a little, or just having some fun. Very, very TikTok dance kind of style. Anyway, Those little things bring me such joy. But this idea of having some kind of branded revolution, and if we were just black conscious conservatives, and then this and then language that goes with it, that is a tad amorphous, that's really hard to pin down. Well, what does that, what do you mean by these 10 laws of black conscious conservatives? And so, like, once when I finally happened to pick up, it was people said that this wasn't like the real book on the 120 lessons of the 5% nation, but I picked up one of those, and it was interesting because of to a great extent there's a part of it that gets into, this is what we aren't. We are not these ideologies. These ideologies are a separate thing from what we are. And I really found that very important. Like, they were like, we are not Marxists. They're not necessarily, if I remember correctly, that they weren't really looking for necessarily like a separate country in some way. That and sort of this idea of that we aren't this or that movement, because what they were trying to present themselves as is a cultural solution. That they were trying to build a new type of culture, one person at a time, through the lessons. And that people who practice the lessons actually keep a notebook on the lessons. And that at any point, somebody could then not only request your notebook, but can actually question you on the lessons. And that this is something that if people who listen to a lot of, especially Wu-Tang Clan, if they really knew what they were hearing, they would know that this was very 5% nation, that there's that and a big part of the quote-unquote cipher, basically a circle, which is 0, and that is cipher in 5% nation, the divine alphabet, or divine mathematics, I think they call it. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, you're not familiar with the 5% nation and how big of a deal that is in Black Americana. And so that you form this circle, and that if you really understand the divine mathematics and alphabetics, that there's things that you'll say that it's like people will be like, whoa, that's real deep, and it really shows that your mind is 5%, that you think like a 5%er. When you perceive the universe, you see things, you look at the letters they're made up of, and and you interpret the universe through their system called, like, I think it is divine mathematics, or supreme mathematics, I think. And that you apply, like, everything that has letters to it. Every letter has a meaning, so you're always looking for this deeper meaning. And a lot of this comes out of, like, in the Greek tradition. This would come out of isopsophy. This would be what would be, I think, referred to as notericon. It's a Greek term from isopsophy that was adopted by Hebrew Kabbalists, and no conspiracy theories or anything like that. It's a way of conceiving of the universe, just as the isopsophy affected early Christianity, where you would see certain letters, there would be certain numbers, and so therefore there was even statements by the early church fathers about sort of this number or that set of numbers added up or put together in a certain way would then show something about the nature, that there's a mathematical nature and a mathematical purity to Christ, or who, and that was typically what it was, is the numbers that could be applied to the name of Jesus. And so when I think of then So I've seen a lot of these debates with these kind of groups, and their point of view on what is the future of Black American culture then. So it then becomes this thing of, so when establishing some kind of cultural movement, say like BLM being kind of a cultural movement, but it's not quite really the effective or even universally accepted cultural movement that they want it to be. It's in fact very much rejected by a lot of people because of this idea that it's really quite separate of the Black American experience, that it's far more something that's been sort of imbued, that and really and especially with the focus on very Marxist concepts, and especially this idea of that the women that male that men in the house, are having males, that it's matriarchal in nature, that it seems to be focused specifically on very specific kind of subgroups of society, and so in trying to market some kind of ideological movement in that way, you end up really with the problem of it being something that doesn't have a natural harmony. It doesn't become something that people find with having like a simple life, a peaceful life. When you get older, you're not as concerned about social things and keeping up with people and keeping up with fashions and trends. So what does some kind of cultural movement mean outside of a rambunctious social milieu? Being a part of some kind of subculture. What type of books are on the shelves in your house? What kind of music do your children hear you play? And therefore, what kind of norms? How do they interpret the universe around them? Do they listen to something like James Brown, "I'm Black and I'm Proud," or do they listen to Thelonious Monk and sort of are always looking for sort of the recondite in the patterns of the universe? Or are they listening to something like NWA or Eazy-E or Bone Thugs, and always looking for fundamentally a universe that's predatorial and cruel, where that you never know when somebody's going to just simply murder you, and which is becoming, unfortunately, more the norm ever so more every day. So with something like Black conscious conservatism, though they want to have some kind of almost branded kind of movement, if something has to do with Christianity in any way, which is supposed to be sort of this idea that the Hebrews had this opportunity to be a part of the religious traditions of the entire Mediterranean and Asian world, but kept finding that they were brought back to certain lessons that come out of like the 5 books of Moses and such like, and then it was really reflections on the rise and fall of their society. Lamentations is a great book that really points this out, but like say the Book of Esther is a borrow over, and with Christianity then being like, this is how then a singular creator revealed himself to the entire world through the Gentiles, and then it went all the way to India, got into Tang era China, such that the emperor actually had a audience with the Persian priests who had brought this new religion to their land. It made it, some of the greatest sort of early kingdoms of Christianity were actually northern African kingdoms of Christianity, where it made it all the way to the northwestern shore of Africa. And it was only after the Arabization with Islam that a lot of this had been forgotten. So I just had to really think, and how actually Christianity took even a longer time to penetrate the part of Western Europe, such that, I mean, it was like Scandinavia wasn't really a Christian nation until, I think, I mean, something really pretty late, like 13 through 1600s or something like that. That, I mean, Germany, had the Gothic Church for hundreds and hundreds of years before it really had become like a kind of a part of like the overall Catholic world. So I just had to think about what is this separate culture? Is it still something fundamentally American that people, black people in Michigan and black people in Louisiana would understand this conscious conservatism, that this would be easy for them to see in their own experience? Or is it really just that, I mean, that what the being conservative really has to do with, we have, the word itself is definitive, that you actually are taming your thoughts, you are watchful of your passions, you have self-discipline, and that self-discipline comes down to the individual. So this idea of there being like a great movement of self-discipline, while for a while that can be something people can sell to each other in a way, like, look at how it's improved my life. Somebody is like, I was once not so self-disciplined, but now look at me. I've done all these changes in my life. Or somebody who's like, I am very self-disciplined, always have been, and this is how it benefited me. That's one of the most fundamental things about conservatism. And in the American tradition, you would then have wisdom, prudence, that you would have then a tradition handed down from the past about like fundamentally dealing with the nature of self-discipline and how to do it. What are the phrases? What are the terms people use in relationship to self-discipline and disciplining the mind and disciplining the passions and appetites, so that one is not fundamentally, their mind, their nous, is not darkened by being cut off from the source of such things. Because the idea being that if God used all his power at once, the universe couldn't contain it. His anger being uncontainable, in a way, but also his goodness being sort of everywhere at once and constantly showing. Hence, even in the desert, plants will grow. That even in the most lifeless places, life still thrives. That it seems miraculous that would be the case, and it's because that this ever-pervading goodness, that nothing can stop, that creation cannot, the rulership, the ultimate rulership over creation. So that there's no place that's so lifeless that life can't exist. We find this even in volcanic zones, that things will grow out of volcanic ash. There'll even be in a volcano, there will be stuff that is actually surviving in the actual in the volcano itself. Like, I think it was deep sea lava flows. You'll find these things living in there that can survive that kind of condition. And this is why there are so many Nobel Peace Prize winners that were not just Christians, but were actually quite theological in their personal writings, finding that it seems like that there is a pattern that fundamentally follows from the logic of there being like almost like a power that oversees everything and established a pattern and can do anything, and that life always wins. That death has no power over things. And that death, though universal for all things that exist, doesn't kill everything all at once, because life is more powerful. So I just have been having to think about some of these things, that how do you apply universally for generations this idea, this black conscious conservatism? Because then there's this thing about one's blackness, and it's, so does this, how do you apply this to everybody when, I mean, you have, say, all these various people, not just, say, even Colin Kaepernick would be one of the examples of this, but also there's that famous comedian who has a show, I think to this day, I'm Steve Harvey, I believe, right? Steve Harvey, where both Kaepernick and Steve Harvey were raised by white Americans who adopted them, but yet we think of them as these kind of quintessential, very successful black people. And so what is their blackness then? Or is it just that they are Americans and they're our countrymen, and we're in the Republic, and we're identifiable as people of the Republic, where if we were to go anywhere in the world, we walk differently, we talk differently, people would pick us out very quickly, the way we see how things should be, because, well, you just treat people a certain way. That's an American thing. I mean, even our horror at something like the Taliban, this is not some, the liberals and conservatives both are horrified this idea of Afghanistan being taken over by religious authoritarians, because it would then compromise the idea of individual choice and rights, and compromise the very idea of what we think of as humanity. That's a view of the Republic. Like, the other countries don't think that way. I mean, right now, China and Russia are busy trying to make friends with the Taliban, because it's in their national interests, and it doesn't quite matter to them. You know, what they do is what they do, and even like most people might, I mean, there's widely, whether you're sort of on the right or the left, most people would agree they wouldn't want to live under Vladimir Putin. You find a lot of people on the right who accept Putin does what he needs to do for Russia, because that's in their national interest, but they wouldn't want to be there. You know, they're not trying to move there. And generally people who are left of center really don't like Vladimir Putin. But that's really a view that's quite unique to the Republic. And so this idea of trying to come up with movements of liberation that differentiate a group from the Republic as a whole, from the general population, well, what does it mean then? What do you get from it? Who then are you as an individual if you are constantly concentrating on your blackness and your consciousness? And being conscious of your blackness at all times. And then are you thinking of victory in sort of the sense of somebody like James Brown flying on his own personal plane and having fundamentally being successful off of black American money in the 50s, and he was flying on personal jets, and his entire career at that point was funded by black Americans. Or Malcolm X, like that he at one point he had a 10-year bid in prison, but by the end of it, he had come out and he had achieved victory in his own personal life. So are you a victim or victor? And how do you sell victory and being victorious over what you have to be the person you want to be, rather than it being, if people just were conscious of their blackness, then ... and then what does that really mean? And then is it even more isolating? Because really, I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing is happening, is that really, to a great extent, all of these kinds of movements are only isolating black Americans more and more. That it's really making, I mean, now the death, I mean, the killing and murder and all that is kind of unbelievable. You know, it's at the levels very similar to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, until there was very draconian measures to just lock people up for exceedingly long amounts of time, and stop and frisk and things like that. And then there's just the issue of the sheer violence that especially children and women are now facing in ways that are really surprising. I mean, like the amount of children, little tiny children that are being shot in a lot of these mass shootings all over, especially you find them east coast to just west of the Mississippi, in really, really high concentrations. Well, so how do you achieve victory over this kind of new wave of sociopathic and psychopathic murder? Or do you have to understand their blackness? And what does that mean? You know, like, because most people don't kill other people, and they wouldn't want to, wouldn't even be able to if they really were to give it a try. They would be too nervous. They would be too reticent. It's just, and I was just thinking about it because a lot of, when I look back, especially at the Orthodox writings, there's a simplicity there. There's a long-learned wisdom, citations of scripture, and then allegories like this is like that, and that is, like the spider is patient but is always fed. There's almost no being in the universe that shows the benefit of patience like the spider. And God rewards the spider for his patience, its patience, her patience. So just some thoughts I was having.